Hello, welcome. Hopefully we're live. I'm just hoping that's good. Hopefully you can hear me. Welcome if you've just joined or if you've been waiting. I'm just checking. I think we're live. Yeah, we're all good. Cool. Okay, well, I hope everyone is keeping well. We've got another A-level math session today where we're going to be looking at a bit of statistics. So obviously the A-level maths is still broken into the kind of key areas, pure statistics and mechanics. And we're going to be trying to do as many sessions as we can, hitting the kind of key areas for this. Hi, welcome. I can see messages coming in the chat as well. Lovely, excellent. Good to see that we're all joining. Thanks, yeah, dressing for the occasion again. Excellent. So we're going to look at a bit of statistics today. And hi, welcome to the chat and welcome to the session. We're going to look at statistical sampling. So this is a lot of the time covered in year 12. This is more of a year 12 topic. Hello, welcome guys. Thanks for the messages as well. So I'm going to share the screen shortly and we'll look at some questions, some exam style questions, and also the expected responses. Because statistics typically is the part of maths that's very kind of picky in terms of the mark scheme. They want very specific answers. You need to quite understand quite carefully the definitions and the key differences, the advantages and different disadvantages of different models and statistical sampling techniques. So that's what we're going to look at. Good, yes. So this is absolutely suitable for year 12. It's good for year 13 as well as a recap, but it's pitched at more of the statistics content you see at the start of the A-level course. So we're going to look at just some very sort of straightforward examples really, and looking at in depth how the mark scheme are going to critique your answers. Lovely. Hi, welcome guys. So I'm going to share my screen with you now, and it would be good to know that you can see and follow this. So do keep me informed in the chat. And any questions as we go, feel free to ask. So hopefully we can see that now. I'm going to make that full screen. So I've just shared my PowerPoint with you there. Cool. Can we all see that? Lovely. Hi, welcome if you've just joined as well. That's great. Good to see so many of you logging on. So that's brilliant. Right, I'm just going to flip my laptop round so that I can actually write some answers. Super. Right. Thanks for that, guys. So as I said, we're going to look at statistical sampling. So one of the early topics in the statistics applied side of the course. So I'm just checking we can all still see that. Good. Yeah. So yes, absolutely relevant to year 12. And we're going to look at some exam style questions here. So just to start with, as usual, there's going to be a coupon code at the end. So if you'll stay tuned, this will be relevant for Snap Revise and some of the extra services we offer to help you with your A-level content. So stay tuned for that because that will be coming up towards the end. But we're going to crack straight on now with some of these questions. So here we go. Right. So this first one. Explain what you understand by a census. So very definition based, very kind of questions you can almost learn the answers to by heart, but often we need to contextualize it. So for this one, essentially, let's just write your answer in, what you'd be expected to see. A census is when every member of the population is investigated. Okay, now this is a really, this might seem like a really obvious thing. If you know what a census is, you've seen it, seen the idea before, but we do need to be careful here because actually sometimes we think of a census as being like, oh, everyone in the country has to fill out a form about how many people live in their house and all the kind of key information when maybe perhaps the government are trying to collect data. But actually a census can apply to any sort of population of anything. It doesn't have to just be talking about people. And this is going to come into the next part of the question. So here we go. We've got a scenario here where each cooker produced at GT Engineering is stamped with a unique serial number. So GT Engineering produces cookers in batches of 2,000. Before selling them, they test a random sample of 5 to see what electric current overload they will take before breaking down. So it says, give one reason other than to save time and cost why a sample is taken rather than a census. Okay, so this is the scenario where the census and the sample are with reference to this specific context. Okay, so yeah, absolutely, some really sensible answers coming in the chat. This is really important, that this is how we need to recognize that a census isn't just necessarily a case of filling out a form. Absolutely, the answer there would be no cookers left to sell. Okay, so there would be no cookers left to sell. And I kind of like, I've seen loads of questions like this in the past that on reflection seem really obvious. But what we need to just make sure we recognize is sometimes a census can actually be quite a destructive process. So if, for example, one of my favorite versions of this question is if it was sampling food and you said, okay, I want to just taste test all of these cookies, and you did a census, the process of actually doing that sample or census destroys the cookies. You can't then sell them. So if you did it for every single cookie, you would have nothing left to sell. And it's very similar for this context. And this stuff we're covering today, this content should be applicable for all boards. It's an idea that's across the A-level now. And since the sort of reform of the A-level in 2017, there is a lot more kind of, there's a lot more similarities and things that kind of go across all the boards, key things they all need to hit. And all of them obviously do the pure statistics and the mechanics as well. So the statistical sampling is an early part of, on any course, of the underlying ideas that we see. So hopefully that answers your question. Brilliant. Right, so we'll carry on then. So it's very much this sort of style of question. So here we go. So the next one says, define simple random sampling. Describe briefly one difficulty associated with simple random sampling. So again, feel free that if you would like to, go ahead of me and write this down. I believe the link's been put in the chat. One of my colleagues has dropped that in there. So if you want to look at, open this up and annotate, work through, look ahead yourself, that's absolutely fine. So essentially, let's go through. Now, this is 4 marks. And some of these seem very generous, but what we're seeing here is how definition heavy the statistics part can be. And it will be quite critical that you understand absolutely the difference between different sampling techniques. Okay, so let's move through this one, picking out each point that's going to get you a mark. Okay, so here we go. So simple random sampling. You maybe recognize this. Is when every member of the population has an equal chance of being chosen. Has an equal chance of being chosen. Sorry guys, I write a bit slowly sometimes. Cool. Thanks for that comment. I appreciate it, and that's why I'm going quite slowly. Cool. So here we go. So every member of the population has an equal chance of being chosen. There's a couple of marks for pointing that out. And then it says, describe briefly one difficulty associated with this. Well, basically, a difficulty, so the kind of couple of marks for each half of this question, is that we need access to the entire population. I was paraphrasing there, to the entire population. Yes, good. And the kind of keywords coming up, I was just about to use that. So took the words right out of my mouth there. So access to the entire population, and this will get you the mark. So I'm going to just state that nice and clearly. Thanks for that. To establish the sampling frame. And who can explain what the sampling frame is? Feel free to comment still in the chat as you have been. So establish the sampling frame. Okay. So when we're thinking about, okay, it's got to be fair, it's got to be, everyone's got an equal chance, then we kind of need to know who everyone are. So absolutely, it's like a little register or a list of all the people. So in order to establish the sampling frame, or it may not be representative of the whole population. Now this looks like a lot of writing. I'll go back through it and just explain what is actually getting you the marks here, because you maybe could have worded it slightly quicker than I did, but there are some key points we had to pick up on. So or it may not be representative of the whole population. Okay, and we'll kind of hone in on the things that get you the marks. Okay, and very well done to all of those that kind of contributed there. That's good. So let's pick up on those key things. Simple random sampling. Every member of the population has an equal chance being chosen. That's kind of your first couple of marks for actually defining it carefully. Then describing the difficulty. A difficulty is that we need access to the entire population. Okay, so that's the actual difficulty because we need to establish a sampling frame. Okay, if we don't know who everyone is, we've got no way of actually listing them or finding them or sorting through them. How can we make sure everyone has an equal chance of being chosen? So that's a really important thing to start off with. Right. Okay, so hopefully it's all still clear. And I can see that, yeah, sometimes my little window with my face in it is blocking the question. So I will make a point of reading out the question in case that happens, because I don't know if I can do much about it right now, but I'll certainly read it if that's the case. Okay, cool. Right, so describe one advantage and one disadvantage of quota sampling, and then for part B of simple random sampling. I want to take the time to go through this really carefully because quota sampling is one that actually a lot of people mess up. They really think that this is exactly like, you know, that they kind of really confuse this with stratified sampling. And it is quite similar, but we need to be really careful in how we approach this. So part A, I'm going to just kind of go through for A, the advantages and disadvantages. And it only says one of each, but I'm just going to list them all so you can kind of take your pick. So for quota sampling, let's look at the advantages, and feel free to submit questions and opinions or what you think you'd write for this. Advantages of quota sampling. Advantages, let's have a little look. Good. So quota sampling actually does not require a sampling frame. Okay, and I will go back and explain what both of these types of sampling are if you're not aware. So does not require sampling frame. Another one is that so basically it can be done quickly. So can be carried out quickly. Yes, absolutely. I will go back and actually explain this because I realize I've kind of jumped straight into the question here and you might be thinking, I'm not entirely sure what quota sampling is. That's absolutely fine. I'll list these and then with respect to what we've gone through, I'll go back and explain exactly the differences between these two sampling techniques. Cheap or cost kept low. can be quite cheap, inexpensive. And there's, yeah, admin easy. So you only needed one of these, but I'm trying to really exhaustively go through it. And also non-response is not a problem. I'm going to take this opportunity to just explain what is going on here. Non-response, not an issue. So basically, quota sampling is a bit like stratified sampling. Although stratified sampling, we go out of our way to ensure that it's still random. Okay, I'll go back. Admin is easy. There's no difficult administrative processes. Is easy or simple. Okay, so what happens with quota sampling is that we do try to pick people in proportions that's representative of the population in terms of what groups we look at and how we choose people, but we get an expert to kind of pick those people. So the researcher or the person carrying out the sample in a quota sample will choose specific people. And because they've chosen them, they know that they're going to sort of fit all the criteria they need and stuff. Okay, so you can probably straight away see some disadvantages with that process as well. It's similar to stratified sampling, which some of you might have mentioned or asked about. Stratified sampling is when we stratify them into groups so that it's completely representative of the population, perhaps by you know, ethnic groups, gender, however you've decided to stratify or break down the strata into groups, but then you carry out a random sample in that correct proportion. So some people may have seen this at GCSE, you might have, I think it's in GCSE statistics as well. So stratified sampling though is a process that we do try and preserve the kind of randomness, whereas quota sampling, there is a person choosing. So that's why these advantages come about, because it's actually quite easy to carry out then, because that person is just dealing with it quite easily. In terms of the disadvantages though, can anyone suggest any obvious ones based on that description of what quota sampling is? Any disadvantages we could imagine could emerge from that scenario? So disadvantages. Okay, so basically a disadvantage, excellent, is that it's a non-random process. So the big one is that it could introduce bias. Perfect. It could certainly introduce bias. And I would say that's probably the main one, that all the other disadvantages are essentially going to skirt around that point. So it introduces bias. Okay. And it's non-random, and the interviewer's choice might lead to bias. And it's not possible to kind of spot errors with the sampling as well, because it's someone sort of chosen it and stuff. So this is non-random sampling. So when you go back to your course book or you go over your notes and stuff, I just want to make really clear, because I've seen some of the questions of like examples of this. Normally what you'll be given is maybe a question like this that asks you to give the advantages and disadvantages, or they'll give you a scenario. So they'll describe a context and say what type of sampling technique is being used here. Okay, so we're going to see that as we go, but I'm happy to clarify this later on. So quota sampling is non-random, whereas we do have some random sampling techniques, which are in a lot of ways fairer, because everything's got the same chance of coming up. Okay, so hopefully that's fairly clear for that one. Now for part B, so sorry, some of the other disadvantages would have included it's not possible to estimate sampling errors, and non-responses may not be recorded. So where they're choosing people and they're not making a non-response an issue because they just choose someone else, they're maybe not accounting for the fact that 5 people didn't give them an answer, so they had to choose another 5. Okay, but I don't want to overcomplicate it there, because essentially the key advantages are it's generally relatively cheap, easy to carry out, and simple to do, but it introduces bias. So kind of in a nutshell, that's the main thing for each point there. Okay, so random sampling, maybe equivalent of this, would be called a stratified sample. We also have something called convenience or opportunity sampling, which means you basically just choose the people that are there at the time. And that would be a non-random option as well, because you're not being representative, you're picking what's easy for you to do. So let's have a little look at this one here, simple random sampling on the whole, some advantages. So it's basically, let's have a little look, simple random sampling. Advantages. And I'll just list a couple and then we'll do some disadvantages. So it should be free from bias. And again, I would say that's probably the big one. That's the big point. Yeah, excellent. Well done if you suggested that. And it's a random process. So possible to estimate sampling errors. But I'd say that the key thing there is that it's free from bias. Okay, now the next bit, the disadvantages. Feel free to suggest. So it could be difficult to construct. So a sampling frame is required, which just means basically more work sometimes. Frame, yeah, well done. And thanks for all of the kind of comments and contributions here, because it's really good to be kind of engaging with you in that way. That's excellent. Sampling frames required, so it's a bit more involved, difficult to kind of construct sometimes. Construct, that would probably be the same sort of point. And it's not suitable necessarily when the sample size is large. But again, in terms of the main points that I would say here, really are basically it's free from bias, and it's difficult to kind of carry out because you need access to that, you need the sampling frame. Cool, right, I'm going to move on so we can see some more questions. So for this one here, this question here, a researcher is hired by a cleaning company to survey the opinions of employees on a proposed pension scheme. The company employs 55 managers and 495 cleaners. Okay. So the question here is to collect data, the researcher decides to give a questionnaire to the first 50 cleaners to leave at the end of the day. Okay, and then we can imagine that might happen, that might be the way someone carries this out, but we can also kind of envisage what's going to be a problem with that, and why we might not do that. So give 2 reasons why this method is likely to produce biased results. So any suggestions there, any sort of thoughts on this one? So they've given the questionnaire to the first 50 cleaners to leave at the end of the day. And there's some obvious points maybe, and also some less obvious points. It's asked for 2 reasons. And also the other thing I do want to stress here is you would need to make sure that they are distinct reasons. Don't be kind of wishy-washy with the same sort of reason said in 2 different ways. Okay. Right, and we're perhaps suggesting what sampling technique that is. That's lovely. That is kind of like opportunity or convenience sampling. But in terms of why it's producing biased results, let's really tease that out. Right, good. Some really good suggestions coming in. Super. Actually, yeah, the managers aren't taken into account. They're going to have an opinion as well, and their opinion may well be very different, and we're not accounting for that. So they've only asked the cleaners. They've only asked the first 50 cleaners. And also, okay, so we're suggesting sort of the size of the sample, but basically, yeah, absolutely. I'd say my 2 main points there, no managers have been asked at all. No managers have been asked. And remember, if this question was about specifically the cleaners, that's not a problem, but it was asking about all of the opinions of the employees. So you have to consider kind of everyone at every level there. So no managers have been asked. So it doesn't answer the question. as in that's where the bias might come in. The bias would be there. So no managers have been asked. And also, it's the first 50, absolutely, as a lot of you have said. First 50, and I will put in brackets because some of you have mentioned this is opportunity or convenience sampling. And the actual problem with that is what? Why is it a problem? Because in some ways we might think, well, it gets the sample done quickly. They might well all they'll all have different opinions maybe. But why is the first 50 cleaners a problem? Because actually as well, they're likely maybe to have been on the same shift. So they might share similar viewpoints. You're not being able to track how the opinions change throughout the day. There's a lot of kind of background context you'd have to bring into, you could potentially bring in to think about here, because, if people are working a similar shift, their lifestyle might be quite similar. And so as a result, that method could introduce bias towards the thoughts of people in that scenario. So, yeah, exactly. So good, really good comments there and thoughts, but they're essentially the two distinct things. If you did say it's not a random sample, that kind of is answering it for both points. They're both stressing that it's not random, but you can't sort of say that twice. So you would, if you put not a random sample and then no managers have been asked, you'd get the 2 marks. And if you put not a random sample, first 50 have been asked, you'd get the marks. But you've got to make sure that there is some distinction, that you've made 2 different points. Does that make sense? Is that all clear? By the sound of how we've done there, that looks like we're all sort of following that quite nicely. So well done. So I'm keen now to move on. Let's have a little look. Here we go. So the same sort of scenario that we're talking about. A researcher is hired. So again, the same company with 55 managers and 495 cleaners. And it says this time, so they've asked the first 50 cleaners to leave at the end of the day what their opinions are. And part B says, explain briefly how the researcher could select a sample of 50 employees using a systematic sample. So this is another sampling technique that you need to understand how it works, be able to explain, know the advantages and disadvantages of. And this is a very common question, actually. How does a systematic sample work? Okay, so how could they carry that out of 50 employees? Now, this is ignoring the fact that they just chose the first 50 cleaners. This is back to the original context of, I want to choose 50 employees systematically. Any suggestions here? Sorry, there are questions coming in, and I'm sometimes not picking them up because I'm kind of focusing everywhere. Let me just have a little look. Did I miss something there? Oh, okay. I think that was with reference to the previous question. Can you say a small sample size? Let's have a little think. It's probably safer not saying that for this question, because there's 2, I'd say, slightly better points, because that is at the heart of it. That's not the main problem. You may well get a mark for that, but I think these 2 points are more obvious, more important. So if it's a really small sample size, then I think that would be lending itself to it, but you wouldn't want the sample that much bigger, because then you might as well do a census. So, but a good question there. Sorry, I missed that. That's good. Right here, systematic sample. Let's have a little look. Now, what you would do is you need to make kind of 3 points here, and it's very much the same every time you do it. So good. And some people have suggested it really nicely about how you do that. Absolutely. So you'd label all the employees. So label all employees, and this is the crucial bit, all employees. So how many do we have? Yep, we have 550. So basically 1 to 550. Okay. Or obtain an ordered list. They might just have a list. They've probably got a list somewhere of everyone who works there. Or obtain an ordered list, some sort of ordered list. And we might start to think, hang on, is this going to be, it's going to be random? Is this going to be fair? How is this going to work? Right. And what we're going to do with that is we're going to select a random number from 1 to 11. Let's put that in brackets. And I'll clarify this in a minute. Then select, oh, can't spell there, select every 11th person from that starting number onwards. And I just want to clarify why this is. You may well have answered a very similar question before. So the reason we should sort of randomly pick the first one and then go from there, because some people go, can't we just pick the 11th, then go, you know, the next 11, add 11 and just pick all of them. But I think what we just need to clarify is this is a bit like, you know, in PE, where you're trying to get put in your friends group and they're going group A, you're in group B, you're in group C. And as they're doing that, as you go down the list, you work out what the teacher's doing, and then we rejig the line later on. So we get put in our friends group and everyone sort of does little kind of sneaky things like that. We want a kind of systematic thing that's going to be fair and kind of can't be rigged, can't be kind of susceptible to any of these issues as well. So what you're doing, the reason it's every 11, I can see the question coming in, is because that's a really good point. There's 550 employees and we want to choose 50 of them. So if we divide that up, 55 divided by 5 is 11. Then if we picked in multiples of 11, we know that over 550, we're going to come out with 50 people out of something that's 550 in size. Does that make sense? Yeah, hopefully that's clear. So that's why it's kind of in multiples of 11 that we're going up, and you're picking from the list that way. So what we're doing is ensuring that we're going in a systematic approach, but we also ensure that we get the right number that we want. So it's out of 550 employees. We want a sample size of 50 of them. So we have to divide that up by 50 to see, right, and what kind of systematic amount do I need to take in order to get by the end to have reached 50 people? Okay, so it'll be every 11. Yeah, so I would make sure that the first one is between 1 and 11 so that I could do that, and it might roll back round to the start, you know. But yeah, so just to ensure that you get that process. But any sort of explanation of that can probably be done in 3 steps that essentially gets across. You need to consider everyone. You need to divide it up in the correct way to ascertain that amount over the whole spread of the numbers. So basically do the simple division and show that 550 divided by 50. All right, I know it's something to do with multiples of 11. And then from there, talk about how you then put that in place, start off, and then pick all the rest from that point. Right, let's carry on. I think we've got another one here to look at. So this one here has now asked for how we would do a stratified sample. So stratified sampling, as I mentioned earlier, it's very like quota sampling, but we looked at some of the problems with quota sampling in that it was an issue because someone was kind of choosing it and stuff. So stratified sampling, you may well have seen at GCSE statistics, you might have seen it in maths earlier on, stratified sample, the idea of strata and putting people in the correct proportions. So how would this apply here? Okay, so right, questions coming in. Yeah, good suggestions. So if we've got a company with 55 managers and can't read numbers here, 495 cleaners, you need to, in order to do a stratified sample, you want to pick it in that proportion as well. So the problem with maybe the other technique is you could have still ended up with more managers in a kind of disproportionate way, or vice versa. Whereas we want to actually ensure that this is now proportional to, okay, I want a representative scaled down amount of those different groups. So well suggested that we're going to put them into groups. So basically the way we could do this is you could label the managers 1 to 55, put them in a list from 1 to 55, and then cleaners separate list. So we'll say 1 to 495. I'm going to say here separate list. Okay, and then what we'd do is use random numbers to select 5 managers, good, excellent, and 45 cleaners. I'm just going to backtrack over a couple of points there because I can see in the chat that you're kind of teasing out the main things that are going to get you the marks here. So the 5 managers and the 45 cleaners are in the correct proportion. As some people have suggested, you kind of do that fraction simplified, scale down to being out of 50. The random numbers is important to, oh, I've just made numbers disappear. The random numbers to basically ensure that, because a stratified sample is still supposed to be random, so making sure that you reflect that in your answer is important. So these are the specific points that kind of show you, okay, I know the actual amounts, I'm being specific, I'm going to pick up an answer mark to show it's random and to just say how you'd go about that. Now, sometimes they ask you how you carry out a random sample, random numbers. You can refer to random number generators, which, you know, would be on a calculator. And so it just randomly picks from a list of whatever the input size of numbers is. And then you could also say like a lottery out of a hat type thing. You just pick them out at random, but it's good enough to say just, you know, select numbers randomly, and you can clarify what you mean by that. But the key points here are that you separate the lists, you randomly select from those lists in the correct sizes so that it's stratified. Right, so some really good comments and stuff in the chat. I've been kind of had my eye off it a bit there because I've been answering the questions. No, I don't think this would be 6 marks. I think this is actually, that was for part B as a whole. Good question. And this was B part I. So I'd probably say 3 marks for this and then 3 marks for this. That's a good point because that's ridiculously generous for that one part of the question there. Yeah, so it's 3 marks for each part of part B. So BII and BIII, whatever it was, 6 marks. Okay, so good. Right, lovely. So some really good comments, really good points there. So overall, the thing I want to say about this sort of stuff is, if you're following this and you think, I understand it all, it's quite clear, that's one thing. But actually going back and making sure you do actually know all the different types of sampling techniques, what their advantages and disadvantages are. They are generally in the textbooks. There's a lot of past paper questions on them, but you can see that it is also very specific. So this is one of those topics that I know from experience that you'll get a lot of people that will basically bit of waffly answers really, where it says make 2 distinct clear points, and what they'll actually do is say, you know, the same thing in a bit of a different way. So make sure you do keep it separate. You do answer the question very exactly, and you're precise in your method, because there's a lot more like that in stats as we go through it. So as we go through the statistics content, there's often more very definition heavy questions, and if you don't get it bang on what they're looking for, you will lose the marks. So it's also worth, when you're doing your revision and you're doing your past papers and stuff, that you actually look at the mark schemes carefully, and sometimes even the examiner reports, to see what cost people the most marks. So you look at the examiner reports and they often say, you know, the biggest common mistake here was there wasn't a distinct point made for the second part, or people struggled to show the final method and they got the answer mark, but they didn't get the final part of the method, they jumped. So it's all those kind of things that can help you with this exam technique. And hopefully that's what these sessions will do, because it's all well and good working through the content, doing all your practice, but building in the exam technique is really important before you hit mocks, before it, you know, it's a late point in the course and you're juggling all this information of material you need to know. There's a huge breadth on the maths A level, but you need to have done that practice alongside it in a very targeted to the exam kind of way. Okay, so that's really the point I'm trying to make. And so I think I'll take the opportunity there. If you can let me know if this is all still clear, stop sharing that. Just as usual, I'm just going to go through some points about what we're going to be able to offer on StatRevise, because there's a lot more geared up for your actual exams here. So if I share this, can you, if you let me know you can see that okay? I'm hoping you can see now my screen with the StatRevise website logged in as me. So what we've got here is we've got the course, which has been broken down, all the specific points from the specification, the syllabus, really geared up so that the questions fit those topics. And then it's all tailored for the different exam boards as well. So there are subtleties, subtle differences that are sort of pointed out as we go. And you can pick a topic from year 12 or year 13 to work through, quiz yourself and iron out the kind of finer points. And as I said, this will apply to pure statistics and mechanics. It's geared up as well, year 13, all the topics there. But there's actually plenty in year 12 that are brand new to us when we start the A level. So, for example, let's pick one. So sequences and series or circles. And what you can do is you can do a quick quiz, go through, see what you know. And it's probably best that you do it on something you've actually, you know, learned or gone through the motions of. Maybe you've done it really quickly at school or you've had to read through it on your own. But do a little quiz. Maybe better than I'm doing it here, and see, oh, there, got on right. See how you get on, and run through. And it's a kind of diagnostic quiz that basically assesses where the issues are. So I think one of the biggest challenges with maths a lot of the time, see, I'm just guessing here, is that when you do the questions, it's often very difficult to explain actually what was the problem. You know, I don't like this topic because I always get stuck on a certain type of question. But to pinpoint, this is exactly what we're doing here. We're finding exactly what the problem is. And then you can jump to the part of a tutorial that's all drawn out really kind of clearly, and watch through these kind of pre-made videos, specifically at the bits that apply to you. So you don't have to sit and kind of traipse through loads of stuff. And I think that's been a big change in the way people learn online. Is we want information fast. We know what we know kind of what we don't know, and we're trying to just get to that bit quickly. And I think that's a really key selling point of this whole platform, really, is that for independent learners who are doing A-level, who are looking towards, you know, a degree perhaps, or taking their studies a lot further, you're taking control of your own learning and you're just pinpointing the little bits you need. So I think this is really crucial. And then following that up, you can view the specification points. So you can see with reference to the exact exam board and what they say, what you've learned and what skill you've ticked off. You get an exam pack, so you can then do loads of questions on that topic. And you can do it, you know, at all levels, easy, medium, difficult. And then also sort of track your progress of how you're feeling, view the solution, all really nice and clear, manageable, which is very different to a lot of the time when you're revising and it's just like loads of stuff to look through. It's all in very manageable chunks, and then really lovely and clear revision guides on all the topics. And these are there for you to download, print, save, just for you to look over when it comes to revision. So if, say, you had a unit test at school or a homework or an assessment, all the main points are there. They look at notation and the level of rigor that you should
kind of have and know. So that's sort of one aspect of it. The other thing, if I can just take you back to, I'm hoping that'll work. Whoops, there we go. To the previous bit. So here we go on the ultimate course there. Web classes, they're running all the time. So I deliver those on the Snap Revise platform on their site. I do drop-ins. You can access all the previous ones. So if this is something you're interested in and signing up for, definitely worth having a look at. I'm going to share a code for the promotion shortly if you'd like to maybe look at investing in that kind of package. As I've said before, we're going to carry on doing the YouTube sessions as frequently as we can as well. So hopefully that would be quite helpful for the specific topics that we're covering. But if you have a question that you want to ask and go through and just really help understand and clarify, that's what the drop-ins are for. So I do drop-ins as well and go through anything mechanics, statistics, or pure maths. So I think I'll stop sharing that now. And I think it will just go back to me just sitting here. Yeah. And I'll kind of reshare the PowerPoint I was on. So there we go. Hopefully we can now see that again. Maybe. I hope. Yeah, cool. So really now where we're at is, yeah, just to remind you that if you have enjoyed this has been useful, feel free to subscribe, set reminders on the YouTube channel, because we're going to be doing this, I believe, Monday and Wednesdays for maths, but there are other subjects at different times that you can set reminders for. And you'll also be able to see the topic that we're going to cover. So that'll be really good. And then what I'm going to do now, just moving on. So I hope you've enjoyed this and that's been useful for you. I'm going to just move the slide on slightly to give the £10 off if you are looking to sign up maybe for extra stuff with Snap Revise. The discount is sampling 10 because that's what we've done today. So it's quite apt. And that's going to expire at midnight tonight. So that will give you £10 off the first month. And that, you know, depending on the package you go for, that will allow you to see, you know, all the different videos backdated as well, and also join the live classes that we offer. But there's such an abundance of really clear resources on there that are targeted for the new A-level that started in June 2017. So the other thing you should bear in mind, guys, if you're looking at old material, old content, old stuff online, there's loads of maths questions online that you can find, but it's not always geared up for the current A-level. So you've got to kind of take it with a pinch of salt and think that might not be applicable anymore, or there might be bits that this is missing because the new A-level has stuff that's been added in. So just bear that in mind, whereas all of this stuff is brand new, it's in line with the exam boards, and we're constantly looking at, you know, tailoring it as much and as far as possible to all the new courses and all the exam boards. So it's very specific and hopefully very useful. So if you're interested in that, there you go. There's your, there's the end by the look of it. There's your code. So I just wanted to circle it because why not make use of the pen? And that's it, sampling 10, if you want to use that code. If not, no worries. I will be doing some more of these on Monday and Wednesdays. But we're going to try and do what we can in the YouTube sessions. Obviously, the stuff on the site is a lot fuller and there's kind of more on there that you can go over in a bit more depth. But very well done. I hope to see some of you again soon. Thank you for the comments as well and the engagement as we've gone there. I'll stop sharing that now. Brilliant. Right. So I hope you all keep well and hopefully see you at some point soon in one of the later YouTube live streams. Cool. Well done. Thanks, guys. And I'm going to end that there. Lovely. Cool.